All right, time now to take a check of Orange County's bottom line. Joining us now to talk about the state of our economy and the nation, we welcome Real Orange business anchor and Chapman professor Pete Weitzner. Hi, Pete.
How are you guys doing?
Good. Very
Fabulous, man.
Good.
Okay, industry experts never thought it would last as long. I certainly didn't.
Right.
But Time Warner subscribers here and in other big markets are in the dark on some channels. What's going?
Right, I remember back in the day, it was Time Warner then, too, in New York, for instance, Fox News Channel in the mid-'90s trying to get carriage, NFL Network. Again, Time Warner, but it's some of the other cable companies that are video providers. And they squawk them, maybe there's a day of darkness or even half a day, but now we're well into the second week. And if you're a viewer of CBS or SoCAL, which CBS owns, you missed the PGA Championship, you missed this popular show Under the Dome, and CBS actually seems to be the one. If there's a winner so far, it's them. You know, people complain to their video provider because overall, nationally, they're blacked out in New York, in Dallas, in LA. They still won the ratings war, especially in the 1849 demographic, even though they lost carriage in key markets on these key, especially with these big programs.
Interesting. Let's go over how it got to this point, though.
Yeah, so you know, when you get your cable bill, it's a combination. You look at the line items, it can make you dizzy, but there's about 50 of them on there.
Right.
And the big portion, although it's lumped together, is each of the big programmers. Of course, the cable companies passing those costs on to you, and CBS wants an increase. They're the #1 in the ratings, and Time Warner, no one knows how much they were asking for. Time Warner says it's too much to ask for. So they nixed CBS, which owns Showtime, and in 3 million homes, and all of these markets, by the way, are owned and operated CBS TV stations. As I mentioned, CBS says, and it's true so far, it's minimal on their bottom line because their ratings are still tops among the broadcasters. Most experts believe it won't go into the NFL season, which is such a big, and you can imagine the complaints that they would get. And again, the issue is retransmission fees. How much can the cable carriers feel they can pass along to their subscribers without incurring cancellations? And that's where we're at.
Got a bunch of my favorite shows gone. Oh, well.
Dodgers
Come back
and
soon.
Mets last night. I couldn't watch Matt Harvey yet.
Oh, man. Anyway, and now you've done a number of reports on whether this real estate market's going up too fast with the local housing prices up more than 20% for 2 years right now. And buyers and builders seem to be grounded this time around. Or are they?
It seems there was a report by the National Association of Realtors that 68% of people think it's a good time to buy a home. That's a high number. So is optimism bubbling up? But yet you look at some other figures in that same report that people are still pretty worried about that they'd buy a home and the price would drop 58%. It's down from 70. That they're still worried about the economy, worried about jobs, and that lends credence to the theory that people aren't going to start buying, let's get a second home and try and flip it, and let's get a home that's beyond our means. And that's encouraging because the price increases have been pretty big in the last few years.
A story in the Orange County Register noted that the turnaround markets include Oakland and Detroit.
Detroit is in bankruptcy.
Right. Okay, so I would think that buyers should still approach with caution.
Things can get so low, and as you know, asset prices, even in Detroit, I've seen some home prices below $10,000. So when mortgage rates are so low, you can afford a mistake. And so you're right, double-digit increases in Oakland, in Detroit, and other asset prices like stocks. I mean, at a point, over $700, even Apple became too expensive to buy. And so I think people turn to homes in every market. And again, the hope is, I know I've talked to some home builders and people connected with the development community, and they're being very cautious not to repeat the mistakes of 2002 to 2007. They clearly overbuilt, and of course, credit was very easy.
Okay, now you and other analysts are also concerned about consumer demand. What did July's read tell us?
It was better. If this is truly an expanding economy, well, we know we'd have better than 2% growth. We're actually below that. And the consumer, which is 70%, has to lead the way. So the retail sales number was pretty good for July. It wasn't great. 2% is a small number, but they say that's a pace for 2.5% in the summer for an increase. And department store spending, that's encouraging. Walmart was up 0.5%. Target was up 0.4%. So that's better than we had in the spring. And maybe the consumer, again, maybe they've bought their home, bought their car, and now they're going to do what we call discretionary spending.
Okay, let's move on to the air. The Justice Department stopped the U.S. Air American merger. That move by the Department of Justice took a lot of people by surprise.
Because there'd been so many before it, right? Delta had a merger, and United had one, and I think it was Southwest bought AirTran. So we've gone from, what, 9 major carriers down to what would be 4 if this one went through, and suddenly the Justice Department said enough. And their concern, of course, is that it would reduce the number of flights and raise fares. And so for now, they have nixed this merger of U.S. Air and American.
Okay, what numbers are the feds looking at?
They're looking at, and this is interesting, so they're looking at fare increases. Obviously, the feeling is if you have fewer carriers, then they're going to raise fares, there'll be fewer flights. That, again, it would only leave 4 major carriers. The fare increase over the last 5 years has been $25 and adjusted for inflation. Just some really doesn't seem like all that much. And that 4 carriers will control 80% of the traffic. They were joined, by the way, the Justice Department, as you saw in the prior graphic, by 6 states that have hubs, that have headquarters for U.S. Air and also for American. So they're worried that they'll lose jobs. And that's what they're looking at. It heads to federal court, and we'll see. Chances are you're going to get maybe a paring back of this merger somewhat in some markets. But it was a surprise. It looked like a foregone conclusion. Yes, we'll talk a little bit. Both do fly out of John Wayne. No idea how that might affect us.
Okay, very good. All right, Pete, more on that, I'm sure, as it continues. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
You bet. See you next week.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
All
Thanks.
right, thanks, Pete.
Okay.